I'm Sienna. I'm the kid.
I'm Sarah. I'm the mom.
This is Queer Kid Straight Mom.
Let's talk. Welcome back to Queer Kids Straight Mom. Today we're talking about the new Marvel show, Agatha All Along, which I have been really enjoying. Sienna, overall, are you liking it?
Yeah, it has thoroughly exceeded my expectations. I mean, I haven't really liked any Marvel shows at all since probably What If, which was like 3 years ago. Yeah, they've just been really disappointing. And yeah, I mean, and I think this one watches kind of like a rough draft to me. Like there are things that I'm like, that really should have been polished more. The character isn't talking in a way that I think upon a second read you would know that the character should be talking. But crucially, it does have what I think a lot of Marvel shows, a lot of Disney shows, a lot of shows broadly have been missing. It has like a purpose for existing, and it knows what it's trying to do, and it's going with it. You know, it has a specific tone that it's trying to hit, and it doesn't always hit it quite right, you know, but it has a target, which I feel like a lot of, especially the Disney shows, have not had a target recently. And so I'm willing to forgive a lot of the the missteps and the misfires, because at least it has that very basic thing going for it, which makes me feel much better about it.
Which doesn't like totally sound like you're selling it, but I get what you're saying.
No, I'm just the kind of person who, for me, like if something is, I'm willing to forgive a lot of what you might call technical errors if there's like an emotional core to something that I can engage with. And I feel like this has an emotional core that I can engage with. It has interesting characters. It has an interesting plot. It has a reason for existing. And even if it occasionally doesn't quite do what it's trying to, it is always trying to do something specific, which I think we can get into more later. But yeah, there is an emotional core that I think resonates.
Yeah. And I think like tonally, it's really interesting. When I saw the first ad for it before it came out, it's like, oh, that's way creepier than I was imagining. And I think it's kind of fun that it's sort of in that, not quite horror, but like horror-esque sort of camp quality that I think works really well. It's too over the top to be like fully scary, but I don't know. I think it's a good mix.
Yeah, like there are some actually very creepy moments in it. And again, this is one of those places where I don't think the balance always works. There are some things that you're like, I don't know why we're making that into a joke. Like that doesn't feel quite right. Or, yeah, no, that's supposed to be scary, but it's not scary at all. But it is, again, a tone that they are going for that I think is compelling. So, yeah.
So the reason we're talking about this show on this podcast is it was met with a negative reaction. And I think from the sounds of it, some like review bombing, because it has I don't even know how to present that, a gay subtext, a gay underlining vibe. Like as far as we've gotten like through the 5th episode, it is up until now, like clearly there's like this chemistry and this past, but I'm really fascinated that in somebody, like in so many minds, it's a gay show. That's not really what it's about.
It's not what it's about, although I think it's kind of a gay show.
I'm gay in that I think it meets a lot of, I'm going to try to say this without sounding like I'm stereotyping. There is a quality to it that I think makes it very appealing as a gay show, but you don't have to be like, all I want is gay relationships to appreciate the show.
No, I mean, because that's what I was talking about, that emotional core. Like the emotional core of the story is about, motherhood and that, and Agatha's character. I mean, I think what I'm really, really pleased with is where we've left off. Spoilers, obviously, if you haven't figured that one out. But where we've left off is episode 5, which there are many things about episode 5 that I'm not sure about. But where we've left off is that the rumor upon the internet that Joe Locke's character, who's thus far been referred to as Teen, is in fact Billy, who is Wanda's son, who actually is a character, I believe I have referenced him when we did our episode on queerness in Marvel Comics. His character is the Wiccan, and actually has just like a lovely relationship. He gets married eventually, and he is in Young Avengers, and he's great, and it's all good. And also, metatextually speaking, his boyfriend very much has the same energy as Nick from Heartstopper. So that's very metatextually placing. But this episode all but confirmed that that's his identity, which sets up a really interesting dynamic with Agatha's character, of course, because Wanda's like her enemy and they hate each other and they have the whole thing in WandaVision. And she has been kind of forming this attachment to Joe Locke's character, Billy. I feel like it feels weird to call him that when we don't actually know that for a fact, but yeah, forming this attachment to him and obviously seeing him as sort of a substitute for her son who died or was taken under mysterious circumstances that we do not yet know. The drama that creates, right? Of, oh, but actually he's the son of your sworn enemy. It's great. I love it. It's really interesting. And yeah, that's the point, right? That is the point of this show.
Yeah.
And all the queerness, of which there is plenty, is really the icing on the cake. It's not a queer story per se, although one might argue that any story involving witches is queer. But
so some of the complaints that have been out there about this show from conservatives who clearly missed that there is much more to the story and have fixated on this one point. The Right Squad, which airs on Newsmax, talked about it, and the host, Chris Plant, began by saying that, Disney Plus is a channel for children and complaining about the fact that some have called this Marvel's gayest series ever.
The funny thing is that it plainly is Marvel's gayest series ever, but that's a really low bar.
Right. Well, so he went on to say, Joe Locke says that the show is proof that the Marvel universe isn't just for straight men anymore. I hadn't really been concerned about that myself, he said, before repeating the whole gays are recruiting children myth. It's targeting the kids, blah, blah, blah. His co-host, Jason Nichols, he said gay people do exist. You don't have to act like they don't exist. But then he added, if the show is meant for kids, they should make people know it's inappropriate for children. Then their co-host, Mercedes Schlapp, elaborated on Disney marketing itself for children and, quote, it's shocking to me, this obsession with sexuality and sex. Go back to storytelling, go back to the innocence of children. That's one take. Then the quote unquote faith-based activist group 1 Million Moms says parents presume that a streaming platform such as Disney Plus is designed for children and is the last place parents would expect their children to be confronted with content regarding sexual orientation and sorcery. This was Monica Cole, the director of 1 Million Moms. She added, Disney Plus should stick to entertaining instead of pushing an agenda. Sorcery aside, because that's an entirely different conversation. Although I will say that making an entire group of young people feel misunderstood and telling them that they're dangerous and unnatural might make supernatural creatures who are misunderstood, dangerous and unnatural, like witches, all the more appealing to them. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. It's the fact that having gay characters makes it inappropriate. That is kind of blowing my mind.
I mean, it's ridiculous because, yes, gay characters are not inappropriate. Fundamentally, if we say that gay people are human beings who have the same rights as everybody else, then there's no reason it should be okay to have kissing in a Disney princess movie where she marries a prince, but not to have kissing in a Disney princess movie where she marries a princess. However, this argument is all the more ridiculous because it's rated 14 and up.
Yeah.
Which I think most of the Marvel shows have been rated 14 and up. And if you're just turning your kid loose on Disney Plus with no supervision to watch whatever they want, you've clearly fundamentally misunderstood, I think, the business perspective of the platform anyway, because recently, they've always had the partnership with Hulu, right? But recently, relatively recently, they actually really, really matched the two platforms together. So you can now access any of Hulu's content via the Disney Plus website. So, like,
Yeah.
obviously, Disney has been finding that no, we need to be making all of the content accessible. We're not only going to produce things that are intended for children, and they've never only produced things that are intended for children.
I'm fairly confident. Like, even what up until this point has just been like this, implied relationship and attraction between Agatha, who's played by Catherine Hahn, and Rio, played by Aubrey Plaza, who is like delightfully unhinged in this show. It's laden with innuendo, but if you're talking about a 14 and up audience, I guarantee your kids have seen and heard way worse on other things they're watching.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I wouldn't even go so far as to say it's laden with innuendo. I would say there's like sexual tension, but if your kid doesn't understand sexual tension, it's going to go straight over their head.
Yeah. And that's, we don't know where it's going to go or what we're going to see in the future, but it's like, it seems to just what offends people seems to be just based on the fact that they have some like physical attraction to each other and some relationship,
literally,
a past.
That's it.
That's
the
it.
Suggestion that there might be a lesbian relationship.
And the other moments in there that I think that you catch on to if you're like really hypersensitive to your kids seeing this stuff. There are a couple of things like when the other witches just met Rio and one of them says, I can't decide if I want to kill her or get her phone number.
Something like that, yeah.
I think it would be a lot more helpful for parents to just say like, oh yeah, they're just acknowledging that she's hot. Like, this is a bit of a tangent. As I was thinking about this earlier, I started thinking about how in some ways this like hypersensitivity and this like pointing fingers at this is complicating an issue for teenagers that doesn't have to be that complicated. Like, we've talked about asexuality on the show. You can find somebody compelling and attractive without being sexually attracted to them, which, being gay is being sexually attracted to a person of the same sex, right? That's kind of our basic definition. It's about the sexual attraction. We know it's all a spectrum. You hear straight women talking about having a girl crush when they find somebody compelling, right? Like in a non-threatening way. I remember one of my friends telling me that she was listening to a podcast where they were talking about Megan Rapinoe, and the announcer was like, and I have a crush on Megan Rapinoe. And we were like laughing, like, who doesn't have a crush on Megan Rapinoe? It's not sexual attraction if you are like fascinated or compelled by somebody and you want to be around that. I feel like if you could explain this better to kids, you probably have some teenagers that are just like, oh, it's normal to feel this way about this other girl, rather than forcing them into a gay crisis they don't need to be having, being like, I think that girl's attractive, I must be gay. The simplification of all of it, I feel like, is worse for kids than just like, I don't know, you can figure it out. Does that make any sense?
I mean, yeah, I think you're giving maybe really conservative parents more credit than in terms of their understanding their kids' emotions than they may be.
Well, I mean, maybe that's my point. That's not what they're going to do, because I think there are a lot of people, and we talk about this with like men with gay panic and stuff like that, that like if a straight person is presented with a person of the same sex that they like notably think is attractive, it makes them really uncomfortable because we haven't been open enough to like say, yeah, that's totally normal. But if you're not wanting to like date that person and you're not sexually attracted, like who cares? Like, it doesn't mean anything. It just means that you're noticing that another person is interesting or funny or attractive or whatever. And I think that when you ignore all of those nuances, you're just saying like, well, you're this or you're this, and I'm afraid that you seeing these characters is going to make you that, which is ridiculous. But I think it comes from that like just fundamental discomfort of people not understanding all the like vast range of people's feelings and attractions and experiences.
Yeah, well, and like making this insistence on making everything about sex, obviously, as demonstrated by the fact that they're like, oh my God, it's inappropriate because they're gay people. Like, that doesn't mean that, again, that there's any more sex than a Disney movie has. Like, gay people are not inherently more sexual. Also, like culturally, yeah, this idea that if you think someone is attractive, you must want to have sex with them. And that you're not just like, oh, wow, like you got great hair or whatever. Which I mean, I think actually women are much more allowed to do than men. And that actually creates a whole different set of problems, right? In terms of queer women having their feelings like, oh, you're just good friends. But yeah, like it's not everything like respecting another person, appreciating another person, thinking another person is cool does not have to be romantic or sexual in nature. I'm totally obsessed with my best friends. I think they're amazing. I think they're brilliant. I think they're really cool and I love them and I love hanging out with them. And that doesn't mean I'm attracted to them.
And I think it's just an excuse. I mean, honestly, so let's say there's an asexual couple in one of these shows. It's two women. There's zero sex, but they're a couple. They are in love. They just don't want to have sex. Like, I think that would offend these people just as much.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I think pretending it is, oh, the sexual content is just trying to make people scared to let their kids watch it.
Yeah.
Which parents, pay attention to what your kids are watching. Talk to them about it. Like, absolutely. But if you do that, I think you're going to find that there's a lot more questionable content out there that they're being exposed to than you think.
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, that's the thing, right? It's not wrong to be like, oh, I don't want my kid to watch something that's going to traumatize them or that's going to make them think that certain behaviors are okay. Hey, if you're really concerned about material that normalizes unacceptable behaviors, why don't you look at some of the like bro dude podcasts and stuff and YouTube channels that are like indoctrinating teenage boys into thinking that treating women like animals is totally cool. Like, yeah,
that's a thing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very disturbing. But also, like in general, restricting what your kid can access and restricting what your kid is exposed to is only going to give it like this mystical allure, right? Like what's much more effective is, yeah, talking to them like, do we think that behavior was okay? Like, why wasn't it okay? Or that made you really uncomfortable to watch, didn't it? Why do you think that is?
Right. Like violence. Like if you're a Christian parent, you can watch a show that has gay characters. And if that is like where you are as a parent and as a family, you can talk about why you believe that that's not an ideal relationship. But I hope you're having the same conversation about like killing people and like all of that stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of media out there that really glorifies violence in a way that you should not think is acceptable for your child to watch if you're so concerned. I hate watching, like a lot of the traditional action movies where violence is treated as just like kind of oh, look how cool these dudes are. Or, oh, look, an exploding plane. And you're like, what about all the people on the plane? Oh my God, that's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much that's dehumanizing out there. To me, being most offended by human relationships that are, not always healthy, but like, I don't know. It's really weird to me. So,
and I mean, that's the thing that we see all the time, right? Is this fixation on queer people to the exclusion of real problems that real people are facing.
Yeah. So on the other end of the conversation, I saw a couple of people that are still like queer fans that are still worried that this show is completely queer baiting them, which I guess is possible because we don't know where it's going to go. But it seems like the people that are in it are pretty confident that it's pretty gay. So that waits to be seen.
I mean, and to me, and it could, right? Although I would say that the likelihood to me that something like that happens is much more like nothing explicitly romantic or sexual happens in the first season and then it gets canceled because that's what happens to queer people apparently. But to me, the creators of this show seem to really understand queerness in a way that I haven't seen in any of the really half-hearted attempts at representing queer people in other media. Like, oh, we're just gonna like throw, oh, I have a husband, oh, whatever. And I think that's part of why I say this feels like a queer show, even if that's not necessarily the primary intention, is that it really feels like, the writers and the creators understand queer culture like the fight scene at the beginning between Agatha and Rio. You're like, oh my God, this is like the queerest thing I've ever seen. And it's written in such a way that I think it really appeals to people. So that to me, it makes it feel much more intentional and like, knock on wood, but this doesn't feel like a show that is trying to just like throw in a gay couple for the sake of making money.
Yeah. So one of the other things I came across, which is kind of related to this, seeming to kind of understand the culture a little bit, I thought this was really interesting. There was an interview with Joe Locke where he mentioned that Marvel fans aren't as kind as Heartstopper fans, but that some people really felt that his character was too much of a campy gay stereotype. And his response to that was that it really annoyed him because he said you can't ask for authentic casting and then be upset if you have a camp character. So, I mean, my reaction to that was like, he's the one that's gay. Like, isn't that his call on how to play that character?
Well, also, I mean, a character is only a problematic stereotype if they're never, well, if A, they're the only representation on the show, which is already clearly not true, and B, if they're not given any opportunity to grow beyond that stereotype. And while we haven't necessarily seen that so far, and his role has been relatively like, oh, haha, here's the teenager in the corner being gay, I think especially the way that episode 5 ended suggests to me that we're going to see a lot more of development for him and interesting places for his character to go. And so I think that if you get too obsessive about saying that, oh, a campy, effeminate character is automatically a gay stereotype, what does that tell all of the real life campy, effeminate queer men?
Yeah, exactly. And I was just thinking this, and I, hopefully, I think there is going to be more character development. But what an interesting concept that, like, when you said that, like, it's only problematic if that's like the token gay character, and how like lesbian characters have been portrayed over the years, and like the token lesbian or whatever. It'd be kind of funny if they were just sort of like flipping that and like the main characters are these gay women, and there's the like stereotypical gay teen in the corner. Like a
but
little,
I mean, that is really
bit
what
of
we've
reversal
seen so far, right? That's kind of what we've been doing, and it's fun. And now his character will get to do some stuff, and it's all good. And I really like that we get to focus on all of these, really cool, interesting female characters who may or may not be queer. Like, they're all very interesting, and I'm excited to explore them hopefully a little bit more as well, because I think there's an interest. We have the maid and mother crone thing in witchcraft, and I think it's interesting how we're seeing the various characters sort of fall along the spectrum of intergenerational female relationships, right? Because we have Jen, who is the potions witch, who had her powers stolen from her. I actually love this, and I really, really, really want more about her, because she's a Black character, and she was a midwife back in the olden times, and her power was stolen from her by, the suggestion is, like, a white OBGYN who wanted to, I mean, called that, but effectively, right, a white dude who wanted to be in charge of women's reproductive health. That's a real history, right? That women's reproductive health was for a long time in the hands of the women who would be classified as witches, especially Black and Indigenous women who had very strong traditions of reproductive health care. And then as medicine became more institutionalized, that also meant that it became more white and male, and women lost the control that they had over their reproductive health. And that is something I think the show did really, really, really well, is a nod to that. It's not being preachy. It's not saying, oh, it's so trash. It's just like her character's backstory. But it also means that she is representing this kind of women coming into the world, childbirth, all of that stuff. Then we have Alice, who episode 4 is all about her backstory, her relationship with her mother, which I also love. I have to say, I love the way they've been doing the song also. We have the Ballad of the Witch's Road, and it has been in some form in every episode, which I am obsessed with. I actually think the music in this show has been very well done. You know, it's not, again, a lot of what we've seen in some Marvel shows is this very homogenous feel to them. And again, this show does not have that going on, which I love. But so the idea is that this is the song that opens the Witch's Road, and that Alice's mom was this famous rock star back in the 70s who recorded a version of this song that's like really popular. And what we end up learning in episode 4 is that actually she did it not to open the Witch's Road, which is sort of what they had all assumed, but to protect Alice from this family curse that got passed down, because at any point, at any time, someone in the world is playing that song, and so that would protect Alice. And so then we just get this awesome like 70s rock version of the song, which is great. But there is a bridge that gets added in, like, if I can't see you, let my song reach you. Anyway, it's like, and so this really, really kind of compelling dynamic about, you know, a mother and her daughter. And really, I really liked episode 4. I thought it was really good. And then, of course, again, obviously, we have Agatha, her relationship with her child, and how that's kind of the emotional core of the story. And so I'm just very excited to see how the other characters might fit into that dynamic.
Yeah, it is. I like that multi-generation, because Patti LuPone's character, Lilia, is like kind of the older, wiser, experienced one, even though they're all like very, very old. Like she is like that sort of wise one, you know, that knows things. And it just, yeah. And maybe that's part of why conservatives are offended by this show, is it's like this very strong, powerful, like matriarchal thing.
And I also love the way that they've been addressing, and again, because I do think it's interesting that this is the thing that has really caught on and offended them, because it's not like there aren't other queer things happening and other queer shows going on, that, but for whatever reason, this has really caught people's attention and made them really mad. And I do think it's that this is part of it, is that it's not just queer. It's like this really cool reclamation of this notion of witchcraft and like the strange woman. And so you've got all of these references that I just think are great throughout the show. So in episode 3, you know, they have to brew a potion to fix them from the poison that was in the wine or whatever. And Jen starts listing off all the ingredients that she needs, and they all sound like they're like these gross, creepy things, like a corpse that's been decaying for 3 million years, and the gut of a eusocial insect, and eye of newt. And then they're all just totally normal things.
Yeah.
It's like it's petroleum, and it's honey, and it's human seeds, I think. And it's great because the suggestion is, oh, wow, witches have just been using these traditional names for these things. And people are like, ugh, what are you doing? You're crazy. And no, they're just normal things. Yeah. They're just like maybe women who understand chemistry and science. Ooh, scary. Which is true, right? Like that a lot of witches were just women who had an understanding of the natural world and maybe could cure you of an illness. And then that was so threatening to the male establishment that they got, you know, hanged for it. There's like a funny reference at the end of that episode where the oven comes open and that's how they escape the house and move along the road. And Patti LuPone's character's like, oh, no, I am not going in an oven. I had a friend, she had a great house and she went in, I don't know. And I just thought that was really funny.
Yep. Yeah, there's some good little lines like that. I think that is really fascinating how appropriate, actually, that this show has met this response, because it is like this meta representation of, while in the show, all of these little comments about witchcraft and women that were assumed to be different and all of that stuff, that like, this is not as scary as you think it is. And then here we are talking about this show to like tell these conservative media hosts, this is not as weird and scary as you're saying it is. It is actually carrying out what they're making commentary on in the show.
Yeah. And I mean, it really also signifies that although we've been saying that, oh, it's not necessarily about queerness, it's about this other storyline. But I mean, also, when you think about it, like I've said it before and I'll say it again, queer, like sexuality and gender related oppression all comes back to sex-based oppression of women, right? And that is not to say that like cis straight women face the same challenges or oppression that queer people do, but it all really ties back to this structure of men wanting to be in control and subjugating women, and thereby also subjugating anything that is seen as violating that structure, which means especially men or perceived men who violate it by suggesting that perhaps what is seen as feminine might be more desirable, either by being in relationships with men, which is seen as demeaning and taking away of, like, you know, detracting from masculinity, or by identifying themselves as women and like rejecting the masculinity that has been quote unquote gifted to them. And so that is where all queer phobia and transphobia stems from.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
Anything that is about rejecting the sex imbalance in power is, and, you know, does it in such a way that isn't explicitly like anti-queer, is also queer.
Whoa. Yeah, throw in the witchcraft part of it, and it's almost like a good metaphor for queerness.
Yeah, exactly.
Fascinating. So our recommendation is that you watch the show, even if you weren't, just because like you heard it wasn't good. There's a chance that you heard it wasn't good because people are saying it's bad just because they want it to fail. So
for the record, when we pull up the rating on the interwebs, like what we really see is that, you know, critically speaking, it's a 6.8, like not great, not terrible either on IMDb, but a lot of the reviews are really positive. It's, you know, it's entirely possible that it's one of those things. Again, right? Technically speaking, there are lots of things that should have been hammered out better. But I think audiences who watch it coming from a place of good faith and not a I hate gay people place are recognizing that, oh, this is actually very compelling and interesting.
And I hope what you said about this being different from other shows that have just tried to have token representation, that it actually seems to like understand queerness and present it that way. I hope that sets it apart from the other projects that have tried to have representation but haven't been successful.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe having that more authentic connection will help people be more passionate about it. Because I can see if you're like, well, I'm not sure this show's going to make it, but I also just sort of feel like it's a token, you know, diversity show. Like you're not going to be that passionate about trying to save it probably. But, you know, hopefully the response that you get by feeling more authentic helps.
Yeah, I mean, this again is really the Marvel show that I found most compelling for a long time. It's the Marvel couple, like Agatha and Rio are the Marvel couple that I found most compelling. Probably, I'm trying to even think when the last time a new couple was introduced that was at all compelling. Because you know who's not compelling? Loki and Sylvia. I'm still salty about this. Like, would it be Wanda and Vision?
Like going back to the movies?
Yeah.
Maybe. I really like Spider-Man and MJ.
MJ,
I really like them.
because Mary Jane.
I really like them as a couple.
Yeah, okay. Let's go with that. Most compelling couple since Peter Parker and MJ. This works.
All right. You heard it here. Check it out. We'd love to hear what you think of it if you have watched or after you watch it. On our next episode, speaking of conservatives in a tizzy,
and also obsessing over queer people to the exclusion of dealing with real life problems.
Yes. I just saw that Republicans have put like $65 million into anti-trans campaign ads. So we are going to talk about why they think that's going to be successful this time, because it has not worked in the past. But I saw a few headlines saying they think this time around it's going to be different. And so I'm interested to dive into that and see what that's all about, what some of those races are that are getting a ton of focus, and what's at stake in those races with those candidates.
The
So-
best part about no longer being in the US is no longer having to see all of the Ryan Zinke ads telling me that trans people are trying to destroy your women's opportunity, your daughter's opportunities in sports.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
It's great. I love it.
All right. Enjoy your fall days. We've had some beautiful ones here. I guess not you, because it's spring where you are.
Yeah.
Enjoy your days, whatever season it is, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
If you found this podcast helpful, interesting, or just mildly amusing, please consider rating and reviewing us on your podcasting platform of choice. It really helps us to get the word out there and spread this information as far as we can.
And as always, check out our website at queerkidsstraightmom.com or visit us on Facebook, Queer Kid Straight Mom, Instagram at queerkid.straightmom, or Twitter at queerkidstr8 mom.
And if you're feeling especially generous, please consider joining our Patreon by searching Queer Kids Straight Mom. It helps us fund this podcast.